We were talking about the Steelers, and it's good because we've got our NFL guy. Chris Carter from DK on Pittsburgh Sports is here. DK Pittsburgh Sports, I'm sorry. Chris Carter joins us on Fridays. I try not to get that wrong. It's DK Pittsburgh Sports.
It's all right. It's switched a few years ago, but yeah, I understand.
All right. But he's Chris Carter. He breaks down film. He's their NFL analyst.
Yes, sir.
Chris, did you happen to get a chance to listen to or hear any of the comments from Art Rooney about the Steelers?
I haven't heard the interview itself, but I've seen like the quotes that have been floating out there because I've been doing my other job. But I mean, the stuff that I've been seeing, it's what I expect. You know, the owner, he's not gonna feed into the fires and say, yes, my team's a circus and everything is horrible right now. He's not gonna feed into the narratives that people are throwing out there. So it's kind of more of what I expected from Art II.
Well, I think the thing that, again, we were talking about, when you look at it, the thing that stands out to me about what he said, we don't have a culture problem.
Mm-hmm.
We were 13-3 last year. We were a half a game out of the playoffs this year.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, if you really think about that, okay, if you really think about that, that sounds a lot like Neil Huntington, doesn't it?
Well,
like the Steelers are at a different level, I think. That should not be the standard, so to speak. The standard should be we win playoff games. We win our division title. We win playoff games. We've got a team that's built that people pick to win the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
We shouldn't have to be Neil Huntington and cherry pick numbers to suit our argument.
The one thing I will say about that is that he definitely isn't Neil Huntington because the Steelers actually have been relevant. I mean, the Pirates have had 3 winning seasons in the past 20 years, and I think the Steelers haven't had a losing season since. Trying to think, 2003, and three losing seasons since 1992, I think. So, I mean, I get that everyone's upset because he's saying things that don't make fans feel better right now. No one cares that you were 13-3 last year. No one cares that you were half a game out the playoffs this year. The fact is that you had Ben Roethlisberger, Antonio Brown, this offensive line. You didn't have Le'Veon Bell this year, but people have been looking at this team and saying, man, before the season, man, this team has a chance to win the Super Bowl. And then after the season, you're like, well, what happened? Honestly, the culture issue, I think, is overplayed. I think that there's certain things that could change, but I'm not on the bandwagon to say that, oh, there's such big culture problems on this team because Antonio Brown is happening right now and this whole fiasco that's broken out. I would say there's a culture problem if what Antonio Brown was doing was causing other players to do the same thing. But if you look around the locker room, he's the only one like this. I mean, and people want to say Le'Veon Bell simply didn't come back because he said, I'm worth more money. He didn't show up just because he threw a temper tantrum. He's like, that was a contract dispute. That's not the same as what Antonio Brown's doing. I would say if James Washington was throwing temper tantrums, if Juju was throwing temper tantrums, if Justin Hunter and Darius Hayward-Bay, if any other receiver on a team, that would be a sign and say, you know what, Antonio Brown's starting an insurrection here. That's a culture problem. No, there's an Antonio Brown problem. I think that's
But don't you also agree, though, there's issues. I mean, we could go back over the last year, 12 months, 16, 18 months, and name – how many issues and silly things and distractions with a bunch of different players, not just Antonio Brown. The other thing I think, and it's sort of the elephant in the room, I don't know that the quarterback has done a good job of being a leader in this team in terms of bringing the team together. And I would point to the fact that he didn't get voted as the MVP of this team.
Hasn't since 2009.
He's only done it once in 16 years.
Yeah.
I think there's more that is going on here than meets the eye. I agree that Antonio Brown is a lot of the problem from that standpoint, but the flip side of that is, and I've challenged people for the last 2 days on Twitter, like we were talking on Twitter the other night, come up with a play
where Antonio Brown cost them
that, or a game or whatever that Antonio Brown had, and I pointed to one, like Boswell missing kicks, Ben's interceptions, Connor's fumbles,
Ridley fumbling.
There's a lot of different things that you can point to each game. Like, okay, these are Antonio Brown, at least on game day, did, except for the last game
when he didn't show up. Right.
At least on game day, it seemed like he showed up all the time. Right.
I agree. I agree with you 100% on that. You and I were deep in Twitter last night talking about that with some of the fans. But you're absolutely right. Antonio Brown, before this incident, and yes, there were distractions, there were conversations, but there would be a different story again if this culture was impacting on-field play. I listened to Matt Williamson a lot. We talked a little bit during training camp, and we made a little bit of an acquaintance there. And I like his football mind. And one thing that he's brought up is that the Steelers had the highest differential in if you look at the advanced stats of yards per drive and yards allowed per drive. And they also and one thing that we've known all season, they had the best red zone offense in the NFL. And you look at some of these numbers, and you're like, how? What you look at the stats and you look at, well, schemes obviously worked to get these things. Where did the shortcomings happen? And it's what I talked about with you last week and earlier in the season. Turnovers were the biggest problem on this team. It was committing turnovers at the wrong point in time, and those aren't necessarily culture things. Those aren't things that are just, we're careless with the ball. I do think the one thing is more of a scheme acceptance that they did this year. They said, we're going to let Ben Roethlisberger sling it. When they got rid of Todd Haley and they promoted Randy Fichtner, they handed the keys of this offense to Ben Roethlisberger. And they said, we're going to put our trust in you and let us lead the way. And especially when Le'Veon Bell didn't come back, they put a lot in his hands. And I think that led to a lot of the turnover problems. Now, that didn't lead to James Conner fumbling against the Browns and the Broncos, but some of those things came up. And I think that can be addressed as a part of a scheme issue that they need to move forward with next year and make different.
Don't you think, though, that when he got Todd Haley fired, he didn't fire him.
Right.
But it's pretty clear that
he wanted him out.
He wanted him out, and he was not happy.
Yeah.
And the whole thing with, I don't know if I'm going to play next year. That whole stuff. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was 100% a message that, listen, I don't want to deal with this guy anymore. So they got rid of Todd Haley,
mm-hmm.
and they made it very clear what the purpose of that was,
right? By
handing Ben,
the offense,
his
guy,
Randy Fichtner, his guy. So when you look at it that way, you knew they were going to throw the ball a million times this year.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he wanted,
right?
And he got what he wanted. The problem is, advanced numbers suggest the Steelers are not a better team
when they throw the ball
that much.
Yeah. It's a reality that they have to accept. And I understand being in the middle of the season and not being able to change from that because you know what, James, especially when James Conner got hurt and you're working with Ridley and a fifth-round draft pick rookie in Jalen Samuels, okay, then I understand the throwing the ball around a little bit more. But this is my biggest challenge to Mike Tomlin next year as far as what he has to do to help them get better is they have to reestablish the ground game. And that if that means going and getting a feature back that goes over top of James Conner or a speed back that complements James Conner, that's what they're going to have to do to sort of create more of a balance on this offense. And Art Rooney did say that was one of the things that he wanted to see in these past interviews. I think it was the press corps interview he did on Wednesday that he brought that up. That is a scheme and sort of a bigger picture thing that I think that could impact the Steelers. But I mean, the culture thing, yeah. But like you're saying, I didn't see Antonio Brown. He wasn't the reason they tied the Browns or lost to the Raiders or lost to the Broncos or the Chargers. I see individual on-field mistakes, and sometimes, by guys like Xavier Grimble and Stephen Ridley, who they're lower depth chart guys that are in positions and shouldn't make big mistakes, but they do. But sometimes they're your $22 million a year quarterback that's supposed to be leading you to victory, and he does a lot. He's never had a losing season, but you have to admit when he does make mistakes. And that's all we're trying to say, you and I. We're not saying he stinks. We're not saying he's not great, but he makes key mistakes, and they have to adjust around them.
It's funny that we got to get to a break, but that whole conversation took a turn for the worse, I think.
Oh, yeah.
When we started when we started hearing about black media guys protecting black players and things and such. And, of course, the thing about it with me, okay, I've been around in this business 25 plus years. So stuff like that,
yeah,
there's no reason for me to react to it poorly.
Mm-hmm.
If you've noticed, I've sort of had a little fun with the
Yeah,
the
you
whole
make
thing.
jokes about it all the
I mean,
time.
like, oh well, hey, I guess that I'm just gonna stick up for Antonio Brown because he's a black player and I'm a black media guy.
Please.
But the point I'm trying to make is that whole Ben fanboy cult.
Yeah,
it's very
scary.
bizarre to me.
It's scary, man.
It's very bizarre. But we'll get to we'll continue with Chris Carter next. It's 93.7 The Fan. Next, it's 93. Is there any way that you can see it working with Antonio Brown being back here?
I mean, yeah, but the door on that is closing every day. But here's my thing: is that Antonio Brown has to want it to work, and he has to show up, and he has to talk to them, and there's gonna be a lot of behind the door things done that we will never know about if we even get to that point. But I'm not sure if he wants to show up. Now, the other thing that I remind everyone, and I've said a lot. I think Tim Benz brought it up a few years ago, but trying to figure out how Antonio Brown thinks is not easy to do, because he says things that you just don't predict a lot, and he does things that you don't predict. So I mean, he could flip on a dime and do something different. He could do something even crazier than what he's done. He could come back and and kind of shut up and do part of the football team. But every day that he doesn't come back, the Steelers are going to grow less patient with him. And I think that he is putting them in a position where they have to trade him. People have been talking about he might want to be cut. The Steelers will never release Antonio Brown. He's too valuable to them, and if you release him, that means he gets to go wherever he wants. He controls his destination, and you still take the cap hit. What has to happen if Antonio Brown's going to come back is he's got to come back to the organization. There's got to be a reckoning. The team leaders have to sort of talk it out, and there has to be like an understanding between him and the organization. And again, not just Mike Tomlin, not just the Rooneys, but the players in the locker room. And I'm not saying that he has to come back on his hands and knees and beg. And I'm not saying, again, that this is going to happen. I'm saying that right now this looks like a long shot. But if there's a chance, it has to be him coming back and at least talking to them, and at least coming to terms with, well, you know what? We're still a better team with him, and we win games with him on the field than we are without. And them being able to say, you know what? As long as nothing else happens, we're okay here. But again, Paul, it's just a really, really long shot in my eyes right now because I don't see Antonio Brown coming back at this point with the way that he's been acting on social media and otherwise.
Yeah, I think the thing too is you can't trust him, can you?
I mean, not the way that he played. Yeah,
that would be the biggest problem I would have.
Exactly.
You can't trust him to come back and do the things he's supposed to do.
And again, for the people that think that you or I defend people because we're African Americans, it's inexcusable what he did. We've called him a clown. We've called him irresponsible. And both of you and I have said that his decisions are on him and him alone. These are problems that he created, and that is something that you can't rely on as a coach and as a team. Now, again, with the difference is this isn't Martavis Bryant. This isn't Emmanuel Sanders. This is the guy that has been the undisputed best receiver in the NFL for the past 6 years. And he's been the guy that runs through your offense. And especially when you look at how they played against the Bengals, and some of that might have been because of the drama going on around the team, but they put up 16 points against the worst defense in the league. And Ben Roethlisberger looked horrible in that game. If they don't address some serious team needs to either regroup at wide receiver and add another talent there and add another running back, I see the offense as having a lot of struggles next season, and that may be something where the team's like, you know what, this is why we let cooler heads prevail. This is why we don't rush to decisions. They're not going to do like Washington did with Alex Smith last year and agree to a trade long before the trade can even happen. I think that they're gonna quietly shop around, see what's out there. If something's worth it, they'll pull the trigger.
What is the least you would take for Antonio
Brown? A first.
You got to get a first.
You got to get a first.
Right?
And I don't think they're going to get a top 5 or even a top 10 pick. But even if you get a mid to late first round pick, and something along the lines of what they already have at the 20 spot in the first round, then you have draft capital. Then you can package that pick or the Steelers pick that they already have with a third or a fourth or a third and a fourth. and trade with a team and say, hey, we'll and then you use that to move up in the draft and you go get your superstar that you want to add into the team, and the superstar has to be on defense, in my opinion, with where they need to go with this team. But I think that the move has to be, if you're trading him, you're getting draft capital. I know people are talking about Patrick Peterson. I mean, that guy's cap hit is $11 million on top of the $20 million. That's $31 million basically wrapped up in Patrick Peterson. It's not going to work.
Not just that. They've made it clear, and he made it clear, that he didn't want to leave Arizona, and they didn't want to trade him.
Right.
People keep throwing him out there. See, my thing with Antonio Brown is this. If you get a first-round pick for him, then you have 2 first-round picks. If you're able to, and it's really not a great draft for receivers. I mean, you probably know better than, but it doesn't sound like it's a very good receiver draft. But you can at least, with those picks, maybe address the defense and things of such. But you absolutely have to be committed to spending some money, which goes against what the Steelers do, to go out and get a receiver. Because I don't know that you're going to find somebody that's going to help in the way that you need help in the draft. And I think with 2 first-round picks, you can address the defense.
Yes.
But the other part of it is, and I mean, Golden Tate probably is a little bit of a reach, because I think, like we talked about with the cap hit and everything, it might be a little too much. But there's a couple of guys like that out there.
No, I agree. I mean,
you go get.
Yeah, I think one thing that Dale Lally and I have told, we talk a lot about things that could happen. But if I look at the receiver position, I would see Chris Conley's supposed to be out there. There's John Brown from Baltimore is supposed to be out there. There's certain talent that you can take a shot at and say maybe this guy helps address the situation that they need. Chester Rogers is a restricted free agent, so I've seen some people talk about him, but the Colts aren't letting him go. He's good in the punt game and overall as a receiver, but. I mean, they could go out and make a signing, and also don't forget that there's going to be teams that do make cuts. There's going to be teams that do say, you know what, we're parting with this guy because we need to make moves, and then that opens up the field even more. But they need a burner. They need a guy that stretches the field. They already have a good route runner that's good run blocking, and in Juju Smith-Schuster, and a guy that can beat you deep. But they need a guy whose speed makes defenses so afraid that the safeties stay back, and that opens up everyone else. And even if that's a John Brown, if that's a Chris Conley, I think that could help with the answer. But if Antonio Brown's gone, they need help, and they need veteran help at wide receiver. Yeah. I also expect Justin Hunter and Darius Hayward-Bay that they might not be around next year.
They absolutely need a burner. They need someone to open things up. They need somebody to take the pressure off Juju Smith-Schuster. And I think if they get that guy, which you can get those guys, if you get somebody there. James Washington progresses. You still got some guys that Eli Rogers and some of these guys like that. But I think the other part of it is you can shift. I actually think, and we can talk about this for a few minutes. I actually think Jalen Samuels could become sort of that Le'Veon Bell light kind of weapon.
Like a receiving back.
A receiving back. That
he flashes those skills.
I'm just saying, maybe he. So to me, and you got Vance McDonald, obviously.
Yeah,
I think you're still pretty good, in pretty good shape with your offense.
Oh, they still have weapons. Vance McDonald's a threat. I think Jalen Samuels, his biggest thing is one thing I pointed out immediately when I was visiting training camp was that Mike Tomlin was putting James Conner through the ringer. When every time they did backs on backers, they said, you're going to be a better pass protector. And James Conner certainly was whenever he protected Ben in the shotgun as a blocking running back. They need to do the same thing with Jalen Samuels this year, because in that Saints game, and everyone remembers the fake punt, but the second down that led to a sack that set up that fake punt and that gave them bad field position was a play when Jalen Samuels let a blitzer run right by him and sack Ben Roethlisberger and kill that late drive. If they're going to use Jalen Samuels as that scat backer or as the third down guy, they need him to also be able to protect, because that's something that Le'Veon Bell did and you never had to think about. And that's something that James Conner did well this year. But you're absolutely right. They do have pieces, but I still think they need – Ben Roethlisberger, you saw this year. He needs weapons that can scare defenses and force them to adjust and not focus on to one player or even focus on the Roethlisberger. when Antonio Brown and Juju Smith-Schuster and Vance McDonald and the thing was with Le'Veon Bell, you had to pick a poison. But if it's just Juju Smith-Schuster and Vance McDonald, you can lock on to two guys and say James Washington, go and beat us, and that's putting a lot on a second-year player that had a rough rookie year.
Absolutely. We're here with Chris Carter of DK Pittsburgh Sports. Chris, we've been talking about the Steelers a lot, and of course, we just made mention of Championship Sunday.
Yeah.
You've got to be, as a football fan, and you, of course, somebody who studies football. He's the NFL analyst.
Oh, yeah.
For DK Pittsburgh Sports. You've got to be intrigued by these matchups on Sunday. And I'll tell you, there are a couple things that really I look forward to.
Mm-hmm.
One, to me, one of the great storylines is you've got two of the graybeard, old head, old school,
great,
all-time great quarterbacks.
Yep.
In maybe their last hurrah or one of their last hurrahs, trying to defeat two of the young gun millennial, superstar up-and-comers or whatever you want to call them. In both games, you have that scenario.
It's insane.
That's one. And two, I think all four of these teams have shown at times this year that they can be extremely explosive on offense.
Absolutely.
So it really, to me, these are games that could be really exciting.
No, you're absolutely right about that. I mean, these are literally the four best offenses in the league. Kansas City's at 1, Rams at 2, Saints at 3, Patriots at 4. All of them are at least getting 27 points a game. The Patriots are the only one that's less than 30. But I mean, it's going to be exciting. I don't think it's going to be like how the Rams and the Chiefs were earlier this season in the 50s and stuff. But I do think you're going to see some really good contested throws into coverages that thread some needles and get by some defenders. But I also think you're going to see some really good defensive play as well. I think that you're going to see Aaron Donald get loose. Max Unger is a very good center, and that's going to be a great matchup. But the Saints are going to need to get him some help because Aaron Donald is just he's too mean. But on the flip side, they still got Cameron Jordan, Marcus Davenport on the Saints defensive line, and you got Marshawn Lattimore playing over there. There's some really great matchups going on both matchups, and I'm in heaven with these games because this is a lot to evaluate, a lot of guys that this is a turning point in their career. This is Pat Mahomes. This is his second playoff game. If he beats Tom Brady in his second playoff game, I mean, the storylines will never end. I mean, he's going to be showered. He's going to be the NFL MVP, and then if he wins the Super Bowl, and again, we're getting 3 weeks ahead now. But if he does all these things, everyone's going to anoint him immediately, and it's going to change the course of the NFL for the next however many years.
Do you agree with me though? For Breeze and Brady, and of course both of their teams are really good, but
yes,
for these two guys, they're running out of
time.
Yeah. And they can't have that much time left. I mean, they can, maybe one or two more runs at it.
Right.
That's why I kind of would like to see Breeze versus Brady. I know everybody's rooting for Sean McVay and that offense versus Patrick Mahomes, who maybe is the most exciting player in the league right now.
Right.
That would be fun.
But I
would kind of like to see one last hurrah for the two old guys.
You're probably you can never say you're definitely going to see anybody because Dan Marino went his rookie year and never went back to the Super Bowl. But at the same time, you have to think, Patrick Mahomes, Jared Goff, you're coming into the spotlight. Give these guys a break. Not that they should let them win, of course, but you might. I do feel you. Seeing Tom Brady versus Drew Brees, never seen that in the Super Bowl. Now Drew Brees, he beat Peyton Manning in the last time he was in the Super Bowl, and that was an exciting game. If he beats Tom Brady, that would be another thing. But if he gets his sixth, I mean, that's gonna further the whole Patriots narrative. It would be a huge statement on top of the 20 years of dominance that they've had. It would be interesting. I'm on the side though. I want to see Patrick Mahomes go off because the stuff that he does, Paul. I've become such a fan of the way that he plays the game. And something I noted early in the season when he beat the Steelers, I said it wasn't just sandlot plays or extending things and just seeing things and just throwing the ball and making a good play on the run. He got the ball out at an average of 2.5 seconds or less. Like, that meant he was processing everything you wanted to do and making the throw into the soft spots of your defense. He knew where you were going to be, and he did that against the Steelers, and he's done that consistently all year. He's not just a slinger. He's not just a guy that just says, you know what, I'm going to throw it to my guy, and if he's there, he's there. He's picking people apart. I want to see I'd like to see him do this and do this and keep doing this, because if he does, I think that he ushers in a new form of quarterbacks, and more people look at the thing and they say, we need a guy like this. We need a guy that, more processing of defenses, because I don't think there's enough of those in the NFL. And plus, I personally, while yes, it would be exciting to see Tom Brady and Drew Brees. I've been kind of ready to see some new guys at the top. It's like the Warriors and the Cavs for the last years. I wouldn't have minded if the Rockets had beaten the Warriors in Game 7, because it's just I'm getting a little tired of that.
Yeah, you watch a kid like Patrick Mahomes play though.
Mm-hmm.
His arm strength is ridiculous,
incredible.
And I think that his ability to see the whole field while he's running and moving
and know where his players are
is just incredible to me. I just don't understand some of the plays he makes, how he makes them. And you keep saying to yourself, well, those schoolyard plays are fun, but some teams are going to figure them out, and they're going to have guys stay at home, and next thing you know, he's going to turn the ball over 1,000,000 times.
It hasn't happened yet.
That hasn't really happened, has it?
No, it really hasn't. And that's the thing, is that he doesn't just make dumb mistakes. He doesn't just dive in and just say, I'm just going to do this because I feel it's right. He continues to evaluate, and it really seems that year that he spent behind Alex Smith last year has helped him grow a ton. And we'll never know if that's actually the case. He might have been great last year when he came in, but right now he has proven to everyone that he's not just a guy with a cannon of an arm. He's a guy that's smart with the football, and he's a heck of a playmaker. And one thing I think that people really need to look at with this game, you've heard the conversation. Tom Brady said last year, everyone thinks we stink, and he said all those things about how people underestimate the Patriots. I don't think people underestimate the Patriots and they think they stink. Some people thought that the Chargers would beat them because the Chargers have an impressive roster. I said on this show last week that I thought the Patriots are going to win because I don't believe in Phillip Rivers. This is not the case this week. The Patriots are 3-5 on the road this season. They're going to a tough place in Arrowhead, and the Chiefs have an offense, and their defense is playing very well. Their defense also plays a lot better at home than it does on the road. And Justin Houston and Dee Ford and Chris, those guys are getting after it up front, and that is Tom Brady's biggest nightmare. Is if he has a front four that's coming after you and bringing heat, man, we know how he gets when how he's under pressure. And if the Patriots aren't able to play consistently well on defense, they don't have the supreme playmakers other than Stephon Gilmore, really. If they're not able to lock down the Chiefs, they only beat the Chiefs by 3 the last time, and they were in Gillette. Patrick Mahomes made several mistakes, and I think that he's shown over the year that he learns from his mistakes. This is the game that I honestly think that the Patriots are in some serious trouble unless the Chiefs come out and implode a bit, and this is an Andy Reid team. This does happen in the playoffs sometimes. So it'll be very interesting from that standpoint.
Right, it will be. I think the big thing is with both of these games, which defenses are able to make stands.
Yeah.
I happen to believe that the Saints-Rams game, I don't think it's going to be a real high-scoring shootout.
I agree.
I could see it being 20-17 or something like that. 20, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I also see the ground games taking over.
Whenever you see, for instance, a team like the Saints at home,
mm-hmm.
that defense, to me, they make enough plays.
Yeah.
They give up yards, and they maybe statistically they're not great all the time, but they make enough plays and they turn the teams over, and they seem to make big plays when they need to. And I think the Rams, with a guy like Aaron Donald, they could do the same thing.
Absolutely. I mean, they really could. The one thing about the Saints that I'd be a little worried about if I'm a Saints fan or if I'm pulling for Drew Brees, Sheldon Rankins being out is going to be a huge problem. He was a big part as a defensive tackle of that defensive line. And he sort of allowed Cameron Jordan and Marcus Davenport to be aggressive on the edges. And not that they won't be aggressive on the edges, but replacing him is not as easy as, just saying next man up, even though that's what the Saints are gonna say, because that's what all teams say. And you're going up against a Rams offense that does love to run the ball, give it to Todd Gurley, and C.J. Anderson has been very active for them as well. They're going to try and do everything they can to not put enough pressure, to not put too much pressure on Jared Goff, because I don't trust Goff right now. The way that I've seen him been playing, he's the rookie that, or not the rookie, he's the young guy that's not that I think might be a little bit rattled in the playoffs. Now he could prove us all wrong and have a great game on Sunday, but I look at the Rams saying, like, you know what, we're gonna see if we can pound these guys, get Todd Gurley going, and dominate the clock to make sure that Drew Brees doesn't have a whole lot of drives to make plays against us, and let Aaron Donald and Aqib Talib and Marcus Peters let those guys have a few stops, and then our ground game, keep them off the field and keep them rested.
I'm going to ask you a couple of quick questions,
Sure.
and then we'll let you go because I know you want to go home and do things like that, and we always keep you for an hour here.
Woo!
If you had to take one of the four quarterbacks, you could take any of the four quarterbacks for, say, the next 3 seasons.
Patrick Mahomes, done.
You're taking Mahomes?
All day.
Over Brady or
Yep.
Breeze?
Oh, especially if you're talking about the next 3 years. I think Brady will be done in another 3 years. I think Breeze is on the same pattern, but
All right,
both
next
of the
2 years.
next 2 still Mahomes. Yeah, Mahomes is just playing really well, man, and he has a cannon that they just don't have anymore. If you're if you're talking about every one of those guys in their prime, Brady, but right now, Patrick Mahomes.
Okay. What's the kid's name from the Saints? I can't. The running back.
Alvin Kamara.
Alvin Kamara, or Tyreek Hill.
Ooh, that's a fun one.
Which weapon? Which multifaceted weapon would you rather have?
I gotta go with Tyreek Hill. He's so good and he's so fast. The things that I've seen him just get behind people, I'm like, man, that guy's just the cheetah. He is so nasty. But Alvin Kamara, he's a running back, and that's so valuable. Great question, Paul. I hate you. I'd go with Tyreek Hill. I just think that he's such a dynamic threat at receiver. He's a guy that I think is really coming up in the NFL. And with Patrick Mahomes' arm strength, especially if I'm building on that team that you were just having me put together, I will take that combo, Tyreek Hill and Patrick Mahomes, before I take any of the other combos out there.
I think this is probably a rather obvious question. Well, actually, I'll just do it like this.
Okay, go ahead.
Take Aaron Donald out of the equation. What defensive player from the 4 teams do you take first?
See, there you go. See what you did there. Yeah. Okay, let me think. I like Stephon Gilmore as a cornerback. I really like Cameron Jordan. He's always been a very good defensive end. Marshawn Lattimore's really good.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just have to list them in my head so I make sure I don't jump. Man, if Eric Berry was healthy, I'd pick him. Justin Houston's a bad man. Oh!
Give me one.
Okay. Give me. Give me Cameron Jordan. I'll take that guy as a defensive end. Bring the pressure and stop the run.
All right. Take Bill Belichick out of the equation. Which of the other 3 coaches do you want?
Sean Payton. I like the way he gambles. I like the way he thinks, and I like the way he motivates his players.
And unlike Sean McVay, he's got a track record of success.
Yes. And I remind people, when people want to fire Tomlin, Sean Payton had 4 losing seasons in 5 years. The Saints stuck with him, and because they know that he can produce a winning program, he did, and now they're here. The Giants didn't take that advice with Tom Coughlin. Now they're a dumpster fire, drafting at the top of the round every year, top of the draft every year.
He's Chris Carter. You can find his stuff on DK Pittsburgh Sports. Thanks, Chris. Hopefully we'll do it again next week.
Yes, sir, Paul. I will be out of the country next week, but we will be back talking during the Super Bowl week.
Super Bowl week.
Yes,
all right,
sir.
We'll do that. All right, here's Chris Carter. I'm Paul Zeise. It's 93.7 The Fan. Paul Zeise. It's 93.7 The Fan. Paul Zeise.